You are smart. You have the credentials. You have the experience. You might even be the person everyone turns to when things break. And yet, something feels capped. You're working harder, not freer. You're solving problems, putting out fires every day, but also becoming the bottleneck. You are respected, but maybe not fully trusted or followed in the way you hoped. This is what I call the invisible ceiling. And many high performing managers and executives hit it without realizing why. Welcome back, listeners, to another amazing episode on the BizBlend Podcast. I'm your host, and as always, and today's conversation, it is for leaders who are doing everything right on paper, but still feel stuck. My guest today knows this space very intimately. He spent over 25 years in corporate leadership, including 8 years as CTO, working with companies like AWS, Airbnb, LinkedIn, Stripe, Coinbase, and many others. And he's now a certified executive coach, helping founders, CEOs, and engineering leaders move from being exceptional problem solvers to becoming true people leaders. And his mantra is simple and challenging also. All professional development is actually personal improvement. So today we are going to unpack why smart leaders stall, what emotional rewiring is actually required to grow beyond management, and what my guest has learned the hard way through burnout, trust, and letting go. So, listeners, meet my lovely guest, Andrew Hinkelman. Andrew, welcome to BizBlend, and it's really an honor to have you here.
Thanks, Sana. It's great to be here.
Amazing, amazing. First of all, I shouldn't say it, but still, Andrew, what a profile and what experience. I'm really, really, really looking forward to exploring this because it is so right there. I've personally observed with the few of my acquaintances, and because you work with leaders who are objectively smart and highly capable, many of them still hitting what you call an invisible ceiling. So, from your experience, like I'm curious to know, Andrew, what actually creates that ceiling?
It's a great question,
Hmm.
Sana. And I think for a lot of people, they have a very common path where, you go to college, you specialize in something, it gets you your first job, and you're rewarded for being really good at something. And
Hmm.
and and that's a great thing and it's a great feeling, but in a lot of ways, that becomes the thing that holds us back because that expertise is usually something analytical or something technical. And a lot of times when we talk about, things like engineering or running teams, it's usually not people related. So you're getting rewarded, but suddenly those rewards, those promotions slow down and you're left wondering like what's going on here. I used to be the smartest person in the room
Yeah.
and now I'm not getting put on the good projects or I'm not getting promoted. Things have slowed down. I think that's a pretty common situation for a lot of people.
Hmm. I do agree with you. I do agree with you. And this is something especially, um, you know, people who are in that middle management, per se, or who have a considerable number of experience. It's kind of a thing that usually, you know, in fact, personally, sometimes I'm like very anxious about that what would happen when I hit that ceiling. And I think it's also safe to say that the very skills that got them promoted are the same skills that eventually hold them back. And another very interesting question, Andrew, like where do you usually see leaders misdiagnose this problem? Like what do they think is wrong when it really isn't?
Such a good question. A lot of times the knee jerk reaction is, I just need to learn the next thing. I need to learn the next language. I need to learn, you know, whatever. I need to get another certification. I need some more letters, some more acronyms after my name, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so a lot of times that is where we go because that's what worked in the past. That was the thing that got us a good salary and a good job and a good title, and we can tell our families about it and
Mm.
our friends and all that. The the challenge is that you get to a certain level and I'll roughly say somewhere around that 10 to 15 years into your career, you start to realize that relationships and how you interact with humans starts to become the thing that is more important than how smart you are or whether you're the best, coder in the room.
That is so right on point, Andrew. So right on point. Mm, yeah. And I think it's a very tricky area to kind of first encounter with. Definitely we'll explore further in the conversation, listeners. But before that, a quick reflection. I think this ceiling, it's really about intelligence or effort. As you rightly said on point, like it's about attachment, attachment to being needed or being right or being smartest in the room. Um, and I think it's actually genuinely uncomfortable for a lot of leaders to hear.
It is. Again, like you mentioned, your identity is as being this, a lot of times this great individual contributor, and your organization kind of looks at you like, wow, this person's so great. We're going to give them a team. Right. And no one ever really tells you that is a completely different job, you know, like dealing with all of the little human related intricacies that happen between an employee and a manager is so different than solving problems with technology.
Exactly. I mean, I have had the now I would say that that was a huge, huge blessing opportunity for me that very early on when I started, in fact, in the very first year of my career, I was given the responsibility just basis on my performance as an individual contributor to handle a team of 10 people for a very new perk
Wow.
in the company. Uh, and I don't know, luckily, unluckily, um, two people in that team were kind of, in terms of tenure in the company, was senior to me. And that kind of created a friction which I may have observed or felt, but I didn't accept it because for me at that point of time was not much of a significance. Because all I was focused on is how I have to deliver according to the expectations, or maybe I have to surpass my boss's expectations as a team manager, a team leader. And um, yeah, I mean, things happened, and I learned really some very important lessons in terms of the interactions that you have with people. How different is the individual contributor role, and how different is people management role, and how much gap is there, in terms of even if it's a star performer, but then a star performer is put in that particular role of a people manager. It's not an easy transition.
No, not at all. And that's why a lot of people don't make it. And that's why you have a lot of, let's face it, if you have 5 managers over your career, 3 of them are gonna be kinda toxic. It's just and what that really means is that they did not develop certain skills along the way, and they leaned on other skills kinda too much, but wait, what you described, Sana, is really, really interesting because the thing that does work is when you let down your ego,
Mm,
you let down that sort of, protective barrier that most of us have up, and you just get really curious, like, "Okay, I have a new role.
mm,
What do I need to do differently?" We talk a lot about having a growth mindset.
mm,
That is 100% critical, and that's exactly what you were just talking about, which is, what do I need to do now? And when you have people reporting to you that might even be senior to you, they know that you're genuinely dedicated to figuring it out. They'll give you a little bit of slack, they'll give you a little bit of room to kinda, maybe make some mistakes.
that's right. That's right. That is something I actually missed at that time because I was actually not aware. And that is something I learned the hard way, but yeah, I'm really thankful. I'm really thankful to those experiences because, yeah, very much essential in your growth journey. Yeah, and Andrew, my next question is kind of more towards the emotional shift here, especially from this transition from manager to leader. Like, what is the hardest emotional shift someone has to make when moving from being a strong manager to becoming a true leader?
It's going to be a little bit different for everyone,
Okay.
but if you think about it, a manager, if you just stop at manager, a lot of managers, they look like what we would call a supervisor, right? You're making sure that people are showing up, they're doing the things they're supposed to be doing, the work is getting done sufficiently, all those kinds of things. It's supervision for the most part. The the leadership part is really where you're modeling behavior. You're modeling the behavior you want other people to take on. And, a lot of it has to do with you sort of understanding what the organization needs and being that person. So it can be a little confusing, but a lot of people will say, "Well, what's the difference between, manager and leader?" And I think a leader is kind of focusing up and out to kind of pull people along, and managers are often very much like supervisors, just focusing down into their team, moving work from one spot to the other.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. And I think the specific space where that particular area where um like if we talk about the emotional aspect here, many leaders kind of try to run away from. I mean, I'm not generalizing, but just it's based on my own lived experiences that the difficult conversations, that dilemma that you have to take a decision because it's for the greater good, it's for the organization or for the company or for your team. Sometimes these conversations are so hard that, I mean, you just as a leader, as a person, you just want to avoid it because you can see what's going to happen.
It is so easy to avoid, the tough conversations. You know, that that is that is why a lot of those conversations don't happen. When you're in a workplace, whether you're in person, in an office, or you're remote, it is so easy to just be busy, go to another meeting, and never have those tough conversations. So easy. And even though you're gonna feel bad about ignoring something, avoiding it, tolerating something, you also know that, hey, in a few days, I'll forget about it.
Yeah.
So, maybe one definition of a leader is someone who's gonna do the uncomfortable thing even when they don't feel like it. So, you know, dealing with conflict, dealing with uncomfortable conversations, dealing with difficult personalities, um, is really, once you get good at that, or maybe you never get good at it, but you still do it and you try even though you don't want to. That's that will differentiate you from 90% of managers.
Absolutely. And it definitely involves personal development, personal improvement.
Yes.
Starts with the inner work.
100%. That's the other way to think about this is when you step into something like management, your you know, your habits, the way you run yourself, the way you take care of yourself is gonna be reflected in the people around you. So you need to make sure that you're putting your own personal development um, as a high priority because you need to be able to show up at work strong, rested, healthy, all those kinds of things. You need to have a good mindset. You need to be able to be present and listen. All of those things are, they don't you don't go to college for that, right? Like, no one's just, like, gonna go learn that in a school. You have to figure it out for yourself and figure out how to be strong every day.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. And you have spoken openly about your own burnout as a CTO. Um, Looking back, what was the belief that kept you stuck in that cycle of, always stepping in and fixing things? Was it this, it kind of becomes an addiction that, I'm getting recognized, I'm getting rewarded, I'm getting all the accolades here, and it's really, really good for me because that is something, maybe not many times, but some in many of my phases in my career, like I've faced with that, and I didn't realize it sooner. It was very late, but I did realize that it took a lot of toll on my physical and my mental health.
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't really know. You don't know it's really happening. You just kinda know, like, things don't feel right, you're a little extra tired,
Yeah.
and it can really creep up on you, and that's really what happened to me, but I think a lot of it really started when, I kinda started to get bored, like, the reality of a lot of C-level positions is that a lot of times you're in a lot of pointless meetings. So, if you're in a large organization, you're gonna be in meetings that have to do with a lot of sort of policy, governance, legal, vendor management, a lot of things that, you know, you you didn't want the job for that, right? You wanted to build cool things, right? You wanted to help your people build cool things and have some fun doing it, and then you wind up being in meetings 8 hours a day that are about, what should our vacation policy be? What should we put on the website? It's like these things that, are so bureaucratic, and I got sucked into that,
Mhm.
and I think, the big moment for me was that I started to care a lot about things that were out of my control, and that's what really makes you feel stuck. So once you start to care about things are out of your control, that's where being stuck can really, really get you, and then it's super hard to get out of that.
Exactly. And when you realized that, I mean, um, what was the first step that you took, Andrew?
Well, um, like I said, I didn't really know until it got really bad for me, and actually it manifested itself in a back injury where that was pretty severe, and I had to completely change everything I was doing. So that moment in time really forced me to kind of look at what I was doing and how I was taking care of myself, how I was kind of taking care of business for myself and my team and all that. Um, so one of the things that I started to do is just concentrate a lot more and to be really serious about the things I cared about, the things I wanted.
Mm.
You know, when you work at a company for a long time, a lot of times you kind of lose yourself.
Yeah.
You you lose track of your own goals, you lose track of what you actually wanna be doing, and so the way I talk about that with people is you're giving yourself too much. You're giving yourself away, and, um, I had to start taking more responsibility for my own well-being, kinda have some boundaries around what I was willing to do, like, do I really need to be answering email at 10 PM every night and working on weekends? Probably not. So it was kinda taking back some control.
Mm. It can be messy. And I mean, for many leaders, it can be messy because um, it's kind of perceived as um, a trait of weakness. Like, you're giving away too much of control, or you're not strong enough to handle everything.
I Yeah, so I have heard that before, and I did used to think about that, but the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that most leaders at the top of most companies tend to be happy people, and
Mm.
you might say it's because they get paid a lot or they
Mm.
have this perfect title, but the real reason is that they've learned balance and how to take care of themselves so that they can do it for the long term.
Mm.
So, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, the people that are really running complicated matrixed organizations, global companies, are oftentimes very happy people because they've had to figure out what it takes to sustain that role.
Agreed, 100%. And and you also now coach leaders on becoming strong people leaders, not just strong operators. So, um, like, can you give us an idea like how human centered leadership actually looks like in practice, like beyond the buzzwords or the jargons?
Well, most of it is being able to connect with the people around you, especially the people that report to you.
Yeah.
And so, we can talk about being vulnerable or building relationships, but at the end of the day, connecting to people where it's not a transactional relationship. So just picking up the phone and having a real conversation with your business stakeholders or some of the key people on a project and not letting every interaction be over Teams or over Slack or because you need something. We run around making everything about ourselves, right? I have to get my job done. So, I need to, how come this person hasn't replied to me? Connecting in a real way with people is can be awkward at first, but it's the thing that's going to drive your career over the long term. Like people want to work with people that they like. It's just a reality. And it's really hard to get to know people if every conversation is just a transaction. Like, I want this from you. I need this answer. Why is this requirement written this way? All those things are just transactions. You need to get to know the people around you.
That is true. That is true. And I think that exactly kind of becomes a true legacy of you as a leader. Because, I think this kind of circles back to where we started, Andrew, our conversation. The connection, not I'm not going to term it as networking, but the true real connections, when as a leader you feel like you have now hit the invisible ceiling. And um those true connections, I mean, people will still remember you. I mean, like, how as a person I would still remember my favorite teacher from my school days.
Right. Yeah.
Who would I, recognize? And, all those memories would come back, and I will feel that, that particular teacher contributed to who I am right now today. So, respect, love, gratitude. And I think that exactly such an essential part of carving out that true connection.
Most people don't walk around thinking of themselves as being a role model, but the reality, and especially, well, you could say anywhere, it could be in your family, your community, your neighborhood, but we're mostly talking about work right now. So, you know, you, especially once someone reports to you, they look at you
Yeah.
like the model for how they should act. So if you show up at work in a hoodie and ripped jeans and dirty sneakers, they're probably going to show up that way.
Yeah.
If you step it up a notch and start to dress a little bit better, stand up straight, listen more, speak with like an intelligent vocabulary, they're going to start to notice that and they're going to try to model themselves after you. So you can have it either way. You can be building, you can build low performers around you, or you can, accept that people look at you as a role model and model the behavior that you want. It's kind of a big responsibility. Um, so most people ignore it or pretend it's not real, but it's
Yeah.
100% real.
It is. It is. Wonderful. Brilliant. Andrea, before we wrap up, I think this is also very necessary kind of, it's a bit of a challenging take on leadership development. Like some founders, especially founders, argue that leadership coaching and emotional work, they're luxuries. I mean, they believe that execution speed, pressure, are what really shape leaders. So, is it possible that leadership development is sometimes overrated?
For sure. And I would even say that, not everyone needs it. Look, not everyone needs a leadership coach. Not everyone needs training on how to communicate better. Some people just figure it out on their own, and the other piece of it is it's not always the right time for it. So if your startup is early days, precedes even Series A, you're running around doing everything. Everyone's rolling up their sleeves. But if you are going to grow, you're going to start to run into issues where you have this operational immaturity because you never focused on it. And people are going to start seeing some stress as you scale. And that might be the time to start caring more about what kind of culture you're building. Because a lot of times it's an accidental culture or it looks a lot like one of the founders. Um, it's a good time to start to think about doing things intentionally from like a leadership development and culture development perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, I think these initial years are the most crucial ones in becoming the foundational pillars of, the workplace culture. Like, generally talk about that, especially for startups or founders. Um, and I think it's a very important takeaway for all of you listeners as well. Excuse me. And Andrew, before we conclude this insightful conversation, if listeners they would like to further connect with you, if they have their thoughts or opinions after this conversation to share with you, what would be the easiest way?
LinkedIn is a really easy way to find me. So if you just search Andrew Hinkelman, you'll find me on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request. And also right below my name on my page is a link to book a discovery call. So that's a great way to get on my calendar. We can get introduced.
Mm.
Um, I'd invite your audience to do that. It's not a sales. I'm not trying to convince you of anything like buying a group coaching or something, but I do use that time to coach people for free. So if you're wondering what coaching is like, what is this executive coaching or leadership coaching, you bring a topic and we'll use the time to have a real coaching session and you'll probably walk away with an idea or an insight.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And I'll make sure to have all the links and details mentioned in the show notes, listeners. So just find them attached along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And I mean, it's safe to say, listeners, that today's conversation it reminds us that leadership is not about being smarter, louder, or more indispensable. It's about becoming more human, more trusting, and more willing to grow personally, not just professionally. They go hand in hand. So, if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it, even if that someone is you. And Andrew, thank you so much for being open and being so insightful. That was really much needed.
This is great. Thank you for having me, Sana.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to all the listeners for tuning in to BizBlend. Until next time, lead with clarity, not control. And this is your host, Sana, and I'll catch you in the next episode on BizBlend Podcast. Thank you.